I love those GoPros.
Oh, what a great day.
I'm telling you.
All right, everyone. We are 2 days in to this Bigfoot research trip. And this is the first time in a few years, that I've been out with my friend David Soliday. Well, except for the Chickasaw Park. David Soliday joined us last year at the Chickasaw Park for an outing that we had. It really wasn't a research trip. It was just where we all got together, and he lives down there, so he joined us, and I was glad that he did because it allowed me to reach out to him for this particular trip. And he's a tracker by trade, or family trade. Has learned it from his grandfather, and hell of a nice guy. We've known each other for 15 years. We met and we kind of bonded almost immediately. It was just one of those things you could just kind of feel it, where I liked him. I liked what he told me, and what I picked up on what he told me was just the honesty in that he revealed his behavior that day may have been what happened, and sometimes you don't hear that kind of honesty from people. That people are always trying to put on a mask, but not this guy, and that's why I gravitated towards him. And we've been friends ever since, and we've gone out a few times. We've been out in these mountains here a few times.
Yeah.
So here we are. But and I know everybody out there, I know what you want to hear. You want to hear some Bigfoot stuff, and this guy has a couple. This guy has a good one. So let's first just go ahead and get into that, because that's what people want to hear, and then they can get to know who you are.
Well, I guess the initial, when I first met you at Honubbing, we actually looked alike. I had a shaved head, believe it or not. And now that I get older and my hair's falling out, I try to cultivate it instead of shave it. But, of course, I was always better looking.
Yes. That's why I said I was looking in the mirror when I saw him.
But,
because I was acknowledging his good looks.
But anyway, we'd gone down to Honubby. I was married at the time, and always been fascinated with that stuff. And I'd had some weird things that had happened to me, and I originally wasn't gonna talk about it because sometimes I just wasn't sure if I really wanted to talk about what had happened. And
did you actually make it into the conference?
Yeah, we made it into the conference and listened to some of the stuff. And my old lady's like, we were sitting there discussing, and she's like, you might need to talk to this guy and tell him, what happened when we went fishing. And I thought, well, I'll tell him anyway. The guy looks just like me, good-looking, big, strong guy. I thought, well, maybe.
So I'm actually going to have to thank your ex-wife for talking you into talking to me.
Well, she didn't do much twisting, but my first, it's just when you talk about stuff like this, sometimes people look at you like you lost your mind, and they just haven't experienced a same situation. From the outside looking in, it's real easy to just, oh, they're a crackpot or whatever. But when things happen to you, you tend to take that stuff a little more serious. But anyway, were going fishing. We'd just gotten married and had a blended family. And I had my boy and my daughter. She was there too. And she was probably about 6 at the time. But she had a son who was a little bit older than Hunter. And we'd just gotten into this marriage. And we decided, there's a weekend I had the kids, and we decided we were going to go fishing. And in my mind, this pond wasn't that far away. It was only about a mile, maybe a mile and a half. And in true fashion, she was wearing flip-flops, and it was sometime in July. And to hear her tell it, it was 150 degrees out that day, but it was probably only 95 maybe. But we jaunted off into the woods to walk to this pond that it actually used to be our family land, and the city took it and made Meeker Lake and this used to be our family land, and it's a pond that my grandfather built actually in the 30s at some time.
Wow.
Anyway, we hiked back to this pond, and the whole way there, I'm getting chewed on because I'm hot. It's miserable, you know. It's just right around the corner. He said that 20 minutes ago, you know.
You got to understand, it's July. His wife is in flip-flops. They're walking through the woods, much like this, briar thickets and brush and twigs. And
I told her not to wear flip-flops, but anyways. Carrying fishing poles, tackle boxes, and children. And we finally made it to this pond, and I'm getting chewed at the whole time. And, you know, that's kind of another reason why I didn't want to tell this story, because it kind of makes me not look the best. But we finally get to the pond, finally get the boys' poles baited, finally get them in the water. And I'm thinking, okay, it's my turn. And I just fixing to cast, and the boys catch a fish, both of them. And then they get their poles wrapped up with each other, with fish on them. And at this point, I'm not having it anymore. I'm yelling, I'm screaming at everybody because I'm mad and I'm irritated. And in the middle of screaming and yelling at everybody, I get hit in the head with a rock from the other side of the pond. And it wasn't a big rock, and it didn't knock me down, but it did put a little dog knot on my head, and it got my attention. And
so let's get this straight. He glances over across the pond. The rock is already in the air, heading towards him. He doesn't see it because it's got such a straight trajectory that there wasn't a whole bunch of an arc. There wasn't much of an arc on it, which means it had some force behind it. Because to him, it was just a dot in his view until it popped him between the eyes.
Yeah, I saw it about probably maybe 4 feet-ish, you know, and I didn't have time to do anything except impact. And, you know, she saw it too. My ex-wife, or my wife at the time, she saw it too. And, you know, a bird can't, you know, if it was a bird, it would just fall out of the sky. Which, why would a bird have a rock in their hand or a rock in their claw? I don't know. But it just made no sense. And where it came from is so thick that you cannot really walk around. And the sawbriars and the brambles and everything is just so thick over there that you can't get around over there, even if you were crawling around on your hands and knees. You saw how brutal it was in the wintertime where everything was dead.
Yeah, yeah. Now, everybody, you know, who's watching this, you know, you have to check out my video that I did where, you know, hit between the eyes with the rock. That was his story. It was me telling it from when he told me about it, because I didn't know that I would ever have him sitting down in a chair and him telling it from his own mouth. But if you want to go in and, I had an aerial view of that pond, so you can actually see it and, you know, see the way it looked. And of course, the picture doesn't do justice to when he was there, because this is an updated Google picture that, you know, they get updated every few years. But you can see the little pond there in the middle of all that vast wilderness, and that's where this all happened. And so he and I went back there a couple of times and had some other things happen.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild place. I mean, it is an absolute wild place, and I don't know. There's just a spooky vibe in the evening time. I mean, it's pretty dark down in there.
Yeah. Well, one time he was down there with another gentleman, and they both saw a young one, probably a juvenile, jump up out of a creek bed, you know, up the bank.
That was the first time that I got an eyes-on visual of something.
And you saw the track.
Yeah, and we got there was a cast of the footprint too. I've got that cast at Mom's.
Oh wow.
And you know, but it was a weird situation. I don't know if it fell out of the tree or if it jumped out of the tree, but it landed in a heap on the ground. And when we got a look at it, it was setting kind of like a frog, you know, and it jumped.
So think of Spider-Man jumping down being in the crouched position before he goes into
Yeah, I
action.
mean, that's what it kind of looked like, but he had his hands on the ground, and I can't remember if he had his hands out with his fingers out or if he was on his knuckles, but he was sitting there, or it was, I don't know if it was a male or female, and it did like a 6 foot vertical jump up onto the bank, just like a side jump. It was the craziest thing, and it ran probably 25 feet like you or me would, just arms swinging, feet running on 2 legs, and it jumped down on 4 legs like a chimpanzee and disappeared, and it was the fastest thing I'd ever seen.
Now, when I told the story, I did not include the part that it had came out of a tree. That's an interesting component. That,
No, yeah, it I don't know if it fell out of the tree or jumped out of the tree, but it landed, and we got probably a 25 foot away view of this thing, and it had long hair on top of its head, and as it was running away,
it was wafting.
yeah, you could see the hair behind it. It was crazy.
Wow. And the size of the footprint was about.
It was probably about I would say similar to a size 8 or 9 on a human. It wasn't a large footprint.
So really about a 9.5 inch print.
Yeah, and this it wasn't very big either. I mean, we're probably looking at something that was about 140 pounds maybe, and it was kind of mangy looking and had leaves and stuff that were in its fur. Like,
so were you guys moving at the time? Were you guys walking?
we were walking, and then we heard it and swung around, and we were looking at this with a flashlight, and it was outrunning our lights.
So it landed behind you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. I always try to think of behaviors and things like that. So I was just thinking if it had itself perched as an observation point up in a tree somewhere, what would cause it to need to jump down? That's why I thought maybe if y'all were walking towards it, did it say, okay, I've got to get out of here?
No.
But since you guys were walking away.
Yeah, and we didn't walk directly towards this. We were just side profiling where this tree was.
Well, I wonder why it was willing to risk. It was obviously hidden well, from where it was perched, needing to come down when it came down. So maybe it did fall.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. Like I said, you could hear the pile of this thing land on the ground, and that's when we were swinging around trying to take a look at it, and it was really hard to keep in the light because it was moving so fast.
And it jumped vertically about 6 foot and hit the ground running. Interesting. So David is from an area, I mean, we can just say, you already said Meeker Lake, Jacktown, Shawnee, Stroud. There's a whole area with a lot of country, a lot of.
Yeah, and you normally wouldn't think of something like that even being there. Yeah. I guess as a small child, I thought there was only one, and it lived in the Pacific Northwest.
Now, granted, that Meeker Lake area is only 45 minutes north of where I had my encounter.
Probably, yeah.
So for anybody
Maybe
watching
an
that,
hour.
to have the reference, my Chickasaw Park encounter is just 45 minutes south of there. So it's reasonable. These are all reasonable, locations that they're at.
Yeah, I never really thought about that, but yeah, it's really not. It's not that far to Sulphur. It's probably a 50 or 60 mile by highway, and I'm sure it's a lot less than that by the crow flies.
Right. Fascinating. So he's joining me here. I'd sure like to include him in some stuff in the future. He's got some incredible tracking skill. When we were down in Oklahoma, he actually found a hole in the ground with a stick in it after someone else found a hole in the ground with a stick in it, and he went further and was looking and found it, and they correlate with a smaller sized footprint that was also found coming up out of Guy Sandy Creek. And the reason we were there looking is because of another lady's encounter just 300 yards from this location at a church. we were there letting her retell her story from her childhood when she was a teenage girl, and she had a visual of one that popped up and took off running, towards the creek there. And that's why we were back there. And so here it was, years and years later, we're back in there. You get fortunate to find these things are there, and they were there then, and they're still there now. They've stayed hidden. We just need to spend more time there, and we'll get lucky.
Yeah, we do. Oh, well, God, this is nice out here.
Yeah.
I wish I could live here full time.
All right. Well, you guys know the drill. Sub, like, tell your friends, share it with your friends, share it with your mama.
Man, that was good till you to share it with your mama, and I couldn't hold it no more.
Right.